This session's speaker is Nick Cuchetti, Living Soil. He's going to be talking today about biochar's role in nurturing living soil. So Nick advances regenerative and eco-friendly agricultural practices. With expertise in agronomy and conservation science, he works to enhance productivity while protecting natural resources. His work involves detailed research on soil health, water quality, and biodiversity toward long-term strategies for agricultural sustainability. A specialist in soil health management, Cuchetti collaborates with farmers and landowners to improve soil fertility and resilience through regenerative practices like cover cropping, no-till, and precision ag.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for having me. It's very organic. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on one of my favorite topics, biochar. How many people here have worked with biochar? How many have seen results? I saw one good. Oh, we're good. But so what I'm going to talk today, we're going to go through kind of what biochar is, how it works. But the most important thing I want to cover today is how do we get it in soil and make it work quickly. Because there's a lot of things going on out there where there's mixed results on what's happening with biochar. Some people are putting it out raw. Some people are doing this, some people are doing that. So I think I've got a formula that when you blend it all together and deliver that to soil, we've got a complete package. So he gave a little bit of background about me. I grew up in a small town just southeast of here, about an hour and 15 minutes, called Owensville, Missouri. Been around ag my entire life. Graduated from the University of Missouri with a soil science degree and a plant science minor. Went into the row crop side of things mainly right after college. And then my first job out of college was in biochar. So I came out of college and took a sales job selling biochar, which in the moment I just kind of looked for my first gig, right? It just completely revolutionized where I went with my career. What I realized with biochar was it opened up this whole living system of living soil. When I came out of university, we did a lot with chemistry and physics and I took one microbiology class in soil. I had a soil science major. So that was looking back on, I was disappointed. And I've even talked to my microbiology teacher about like, we should have had more because now I'm out in the field and this stuff is like the new frontier. So I was able to meet Biochar here. He's way more of a biochar wizard than I am. But he opened up these new ideas, his new horizon, and right about that time, 2014, we were hearing the word regenerative ag, which I'm sure we've all heard many times since then. And so it was just an exciting time, and I was super grateful to have that nudge in the right direction at such a critical point of my career. So now I'm here, it's talking to you guys about biochar. Oh, and then Oakalee Rose Farms is my farm that my wife and I just started last fall. We have a direct-to-consumer grass-fed business where we raise grass-finished cows and sell them directly in the St. Louis market at a farmer's market. So yeah, overview is what we're going to talk about, like I mentioned before, is what is biochar, what are the uses of biochar, how is biochar looking at it as a climate mitigation tool. We're going to put a concept of what biochar is, a soil battery. Has anybody heard that concept before? Cool, awesome. And then we're going to talk about where did the word biochar come from and all the excitement around it, which is going to be terracotta soils. And then what biochar looks like in agriculture, and then that should be 5 items. I did not update that. Preparing biochar for soil. So what is biochar? Well, first we have a fancy definition. It is a solid substance obtained by biomass carbonization and thermochemical conversion in an oxygen-limited environment. That's a mouthful. It's essentially charcoal, used for a specific purpose. And so when we make biochar, we have to look at what we're making it with. So there's all kinds of things we can cook into biochar. Real popular one is hardwood. We live in Missouri, it's a charcoal state, so we get a lot of hardwood. But it's really, with the biochar, we should be looking at agricultural waste, in my opinion. How can we take what's happening and being burned and not used and convert that into biochar and get it into soil so we're not releasing that CO2 and we're putting it in soil and further contributing to the drawdown. We're going to get more into that here in a minute. Mere charcoal production, distinguished from charcoal because it's a soil amendment and reduce emissions, which we're going to get into. So how is biochar produced? It's a process called pyrolysis. This is the same process that we make charcoal with. There's a few other ways, gasification and other things, but this is probably your most common you're going to see is pyrolysis. Essentially just making charcoal. You stick your biomass into say a container, close the lid, it gets a little bit of oxygen. This is a real simple way. I mean, any engineers in here, I hope I'm not offending you. But then you basically cook that biomass instead of burning the biomass. Because when we burn it, it releases CO2. When we cook it, it releases the volatiles, but you're left with the carbon structure, which is the biochar. So, and on the outside of that, we get three basic, there's more product subcategories, but you get biochar. But what we really want to be looking at is the fuel and the energy. Biochar creates a lot of energy, so we need to be capturing that heat and the biofuel. The technology is not, the energy technology is there, but the fuel, the economy of scales is still unfolding. So biochar is really infant, I would say, in this industry, because we really need to be capturing all revenue streams off biochar production to make it economically feasible at scale. Right now, that's not happening. I think carbon markets will play in that in the future. I'll leave that for another subject. So the uses of biochar, there's a lot. This is just a small list. I read an article called The 55 Uses of Biochar back in the day, and it just kind of blew my mind that all these uses for charcoal or biochar were out there. Big one that I've heard of carbon air filter, carbon water filters. That's the kind of system we're working with here. It can absorb all the nutrients, absorb all that stuff, and in our sense, bring it into soil and deliver it to plants. So you'll see some other things. Medicine. You know, people anciently have taken charcoal to detox their system. Construction, using it for textile building blocks and things like that.
You're missing one there, it's used for art too.
It is used for art. I don't see it. Yep, not art not in there. But drawing on caves, charcoal. So, and then food, a important one I think is going to evolve here in the near term is livestock use. I don't think we're there yet, but adding this to the diet of animals does increase gut health, and then on the outside you get increased fertilizer value out the back, which is good for soil. So you get that done. When I don't think it's approved for animal feeds. That's a whole nother box of worms you got to unpack. But I think that will be here before we know it.
I got one question though.
Yes, sir.
I was just at a customer's place the other day that they put it in with their chicken feed. Or they actually just put it in for bedding, but the chickens will
Eat it.
eat it. And that's one thing they were saying is that it really increases the value of it.
I love that point. Absolutely, because you put it out there and then animals start eating it. Right. Animals don't just eat stuff randomly. There's a reason they're after that. And so absolutely, it's a great point. Not only were they getting bedding, but they were getting bird health because the animals were consuming it. And then that makes just the best compost manure you could ever dream of right there. Thank you. So biochar is not a fertilizer. That is a key point that I want to really drill in your head, that it's not a fertilizer. But what is biochar? Biochar is a sponge. It brings everything together, water and nutrients, all to a central area, hopefully the root zone, down in the soil, where plants and roots can go in and do the exchange. Microbes get what they need and plants get what they need. But this is like a home for those microbes. So it brings it all together and stores it. It's a storehouse. That's what I was just saying. It sponges it all up and holds it. And then it's a substrate for interactions to happen. I don't know how to explain this too much, but there's a lot of complex things that happen in microbiology and soil. And this is a place for all those things to take place and enhance what's happening. It provides structure. That's that home for microbes. If you've used biochar, you've probably heard people say it's a home for microbes. And it is. It's kind of like, I was talking to Dave last night, how do I describe this to people? I'm going to take a stab at it, so I don't laugh. But imagine going to an Airbnb and you walk in. Option one is you walk in, it's down to the studs, there's no electric, no water, no plumbing, you're just sleeping on the floor, no bed, you're just on the floor for that night, for that Airbnb. Now imagine walking into a normal place where it's got running water, heat, electric, everything's there, you just chill up and use it. That's kind of what you're looking at, empty charcoal, empty biochar, and a loaded biochar, which we're gonna get into later. But I want to plant that seed now so you can kind of think on that. And stop me at any time for any questions. And a seed, so how is biochar a seed? Well, when we package biochar with all the appropriate minerals and nutrients and microbes, and you get that into soil, 3 to 5%, hopefully those 3 to 5% acts as seeds through the soil for life to build on. So it's not an actual seed, but it's a seed within the soil matrix where things can be built, more complex humus can be built, so it just all comes together and kind of grows out. And then the last thing, of course, is sequester carbon. When we make biochar, it's fixed into a very semi-permanent form. It's not permanent, but it's going to stay in the soil for a long, long time, hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. So once we get it converted into that charcoal or biochar structure, it's there for quite a while. Which leads us into the biochar mitigation strategy. Like I mentioned in the beginning, we really need to look at agricultural waste streams because I think we're missing the boat on that. A little bit of that has to do with the technology that we have available. It's very, very expensive for these biochar plants. I mean, millions in some instances and 1 million at a cheap one. And so we have to look at ways to capture all this agricultural residue but not create a problem like clear cutting trees and feed it into that system. That just can't be part of it. So, and like I mentioned, I think carbon credits are going to play big time into biochar. I'm sure people have been hearing about carbon credits. It's kind of a crazy place right now, the best way to describe it. There's a lot of uncertainty and skepticism around carbon markets, which I can see why. Because the majority of the carbon markets are being driven by row crop agriculture, by additional practices, no-till cover crop, and those can be reversed real quickly if they, you can be no-till cover crop for 3 years and then go chisel plow and it's all gone. All that progress. Biochar, once you put it in the soil, good luck. It wouldn't be economically feasible to go get it out. So once it's there, and that's adding to what's called the permanence factor. So that's why I think biochar has a bright future in the carbon market. But we'll see. It's not there yet. Like I mentioned before, it creates energy, fuel, and soil amendment. And, yep, enhances soil structure. So I want to put this thought into your guys' head of biochar as a battery. Who think, we had a couple people say they recognize a battery. So biochar has the ability to absorb and hold charge, like a battery. And so I actually, researching for this PowerPoint, I looked up some YouTube videos of this, and this one guy literally taken an old battery part and put charcoal in it, charged it up, and then put a light, after it was done charging, put probes on it, put a light bulb, and it lit up. And it would probably stay lit for a while. And so if you think about that, it could hold all that charge. Well, that charge in our sense of soil is nutrients and minerals.
That's actually corn cob inside.
That's actually a corn, yeah, good point. That's a corn cob with the University of Illinois. This is like 2014 they were doing this research. I didn't find too much follow-up, so I don't know what happened with it. I just clipped it and threw it in here to make the point of biochar is electric. How many people think of soil as electrical? Awesome, that's great, because it is very electrical and biological. And so with this kind of capacity, which we're going to get to in a minute, 1 gram of biochar has the surface area of 10,000 square foot. Olympic swimming pool is about 13 or 14,000 and a tennis court is about 8. So it's somewhere between that, but 1 gram, which would fit in my hand. That's pretty incredible. When you think about,
Oops, go backwards.
yeah, this, I Googled it just so you guys would believe me, of course. But you just do a simple Google and that comes right up by Science Direct. So if we have that kind of capacity and 1 gram of biochar, which would fit in my hand, think about where that could go. If you had, maybe say hundreds or even thousands of pounds per acre, how much extra charge could be held, how much more carbon could be in that system to really deliver that to the plants. So I just want to plant that seed in your head about the surface area of biochar charcoal is just insane. Still can't get my head around it. So this is again to the point of climate mitigation with the carbon cycle, trying to close that loop with the biochar, using all these, including the agricultural residues, like I mentioned. Another big one I haven't mentioned is forestry residues, especially up in the Northwest. You have a lot of forest residues that could go to this, and this is where the biochar industry is really active, I would say, is Northwest, forestry industry, West Coast, very, very hot and heavy out there. So that's what we're seeing that. And municipal waste has another maybe promise too. Yeah, it goes through pyrolysis, you get biochar, and you get your fuel, energy, heat, etc. Have any questions right now? Okay. All right. So where did it come from? Why did we start talking about biochar? And it all leads back to South America. Amazonian rainforest and researchers coming across these deep, dark, black, fertile soils in the middle of all these red, oxidized, highly weathered, tropical soils. And, at first they thought, oh, it's just a natural cycle. Well, after enough research, they realized these are man-made. There's no way that they just happen because they're surrounded by all these red soils.
Hit the button,
What was that?
hit the button. There you go.
Yeah, so terra preta is Portuguese for black earth, deep, dark, highly fertile soil, but the key here, high microbial activity and sustained over hundreds of years. So these natives have now been there for a long time. These soils are still highly productive even after they've left. That is incredible, especially in these high rainfall environments where you have heavy leaching. And then, so they were made with not just biochar, but they would throw their pots, their manure, their bones, pottery, basically anything that would be degraded, they figured out they could throw it in there. And they would create the compost and put it to the soil. And you have to think back in that day how precious charcoal was. I mean, think about it. It was used to cook. And so for them to be putting it in soil at that scale, and the amount of work, they didn't have bulldozers and track hoes and chainsaws. This was a lot of labor to make charcoal, and they were doing it and putting it in soil. So they knew how important that was, which I find very interesting. And I was thinking about, dang, it was really hard to make charcoal back then, I'm sure. And I thought about all the work, so they really, really wanted this to happen.
Hint, they made a lot of pottery too.
Yep. Yeah, because all these soils, they find shards of pots in them. That's another reason they said, well, this isn't natural. So they were, instead of doing slash and burn, they were doing slash and char agriculture. So biochar in our agricultural sense today, like I mentioned, we need to be harvesting these residues and these waste streams and turning them into biochar. But there's also, we have soil on the left, but livestock confinement operations. This is one thing I think we should be using everything. These CAFOs have a lot of manure and a lot of emissions, and so if we can upgrade that, make it a little cleaner, I think that's a good thing. And then all those byproducts that ultimately end up in soil anyways would now have carbon and biochar attached to that. I think that's huge. I think that's one of our biggest opportunities there. And then if you could take it to the next step and take that manure and bring it into a composting process where the biochar is put in before, that's another good process. And then I don't know much about the gas yield or the biogas, but I do know that on these swine operations, they'll put like a tarp over the lagoon and harvest the methane. So I think what they're saying there is we put biochar in there, it increases the speed of microbial activity, which releases more methane. So if you had a roof on it, I'd say go for it. If you didn't, I'd say probably not. And the trees and forests and manure.
So, just to
Yep.
mention, so the company that Nick started working for, TerraChar, they currently sell most of their biochar to farms in the southeast, to poultry barns, and they put it in the gutter where it soaks up the ammonia, the phosphorus, and other volatile elements and improves the health and atmosphere of the barn. And then they can take it out and sell it as a higher value nutrient source, a fertilizer. So this is what he's doing. Meanwhile, he's not got any business here in Missouri much. It's only at the row crop farms. So it does some extraordinary things too. Yeah, putting it in livestock operations is quite a little fine thing to figure out how to shoehorn this substance into these operations.
Yeah, so I don't have a slide in here about what I'm going to talk about, but I want to piggyback off that point. Is what's keeping this from scaling right now is the cost and availability of char. You know, when you think about it from 1 acre standpoint, it's pretty reasonable. But when you think about it from hundreds of acres standpoint, it's not so reasonable because of the amount of volume that's got to go out and the amount of money that char costs. You know, if it's 25 cents a pound, when you put out 1,000 pounds, that's $250 per acre. You know, and that's for pretty, I would consider light dose. So we have to think about, and that's why I like animal manure is because it's like a vehicle into the soil. It's already being applied. It's already just piggybacking on the manure. Because handling this stuff is another big issue. Probably won't talk about today too much, but it's dusty, it's dry, it's hard to mix. We need a commercial process or system around handling, blending, getting into the soil. So we're just starting to figure all this out. And so this is what I really want to talk about today is getting this in the soil. And so what is the optimum, I guess, blend, or we're not going to talk about exact rates, but just higher level concepts. So the 5 M's are, the first one is micronize. Get it down to a smallest particle size that's reasonable for you. You just don't want like big chunks in the soil. You want as small as possible that you can handle. The smaller you get, the dustier it gets, the harder it is to handle. I like anywhere between sawdust grade kind of texture to maybe chunky would be a dime or a quarter kind of grade, but really nothing bigger than that because it doesn't get enough distribution through the soil. And the smaller the particle size, the more surface area you get distributed throughout the soil. So another one. Moisten. This is important because, like I mentioned, biochar is very dry and dusty when it comes out of the process. So getting it to, well, for one, get it to handle it so you can handle it. And two is, biology doesn't work too well without water. It's 99.9% water. So if we want biology to work in their new condos, they got to have some drink. So.
Also, if you don't have enough water in your biochar, it's likely to overheat and catch fire, and it won't burn, but it'll smolder on you.
And
It's hazardous if it's bone dry.
I've witnessed this. When I worked for TerraChar, we had a fresh semi-load delivered, and those aren't cheap. You know, there's a couple grand per semi, and we walk out I come into work next day, and the thing's just smoking. And getting that thing out is almost impossible. You can't just spray water on it. It's just an uphill battle because it's so dry at that stage of when it comes out of the burner that it's hydrophilic actually. It actually feeds water until it can eventually equalize. So it's just not a good situation. So thank you for that point, David. Add minerals.